Welcome to Securing America with me, Frank Gaffney, the program that's a kind of owner's manual for protecting the country we love against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to God's glory and that of his kingdom. A man who has done an outsized job of protecting our country for decades, both in the uniform of the United States Army, indeed one of its most decorated and accomplished special operators, is our first guest. His name is Lieutenant General William Jerry Boykin. These days, he is the executive vice president of a marvelous organization, the Family Research Council, and in that capacity and many others, he continues to serve our country, faithfully fulfilling that oath that he swore to protect our constitutional republic against all enemies, foreign and domestic. General Boykin, it's always a delight to have you with us, sir. Welcome back to Securing America.
Thank you, Frank. I'm delighted to be with you.
I've got so much I want to talk with you about. We're going to take 2 blocks to do it. We won't do justice to your insights into any of these matters, unfortunately, but let's get started with what's weighing on me particularly, and I think on you too, sir, and that is we have a situation in which the commander-in-chief of the United States military, our president, Joe Biden, is now known to have been deeply compromised by this country's most dangerous enemy ever, namely the Chinese Communist Party. I think in the days to come, we're going to learn more and more and more about the extent of that compromise. But let me just start with the threshold question, sir. Am I right that anyone in the chain of command south of the commander-in-chief who had a fraction of the really problematic contacts, the ties in various forms, and most especially the track record of receiving payments to his family, but to the big guy himself, from Chinese intelligence services, no less, would be long since removed from any kind of position of responsibility, if not actually serving hard time in federal prison.
Yeah, there is no question in my mind, Frank, that were this anybody other than the commander in chief himself, first of all, this individual would not be able to get a security clearance. You can't have these kind of close and continuous ties to a foreign power, whether they are declared an enemy or not. You have to report close and continuous relationships. So they wouldn't get a clearance. And furthermore, I don't think there's any question there would be an investigation. And I think probably followed by a hearing, at least before a grand jury, as to whether they should be taken to court.
Now, you're speaking as someone who has not only held extremely sensitive positions in the special operations of our military, you've also spent a lot of time in the intelligence community as well and finished up your distinguished career in government, at least to this point, sir, as the Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. So when you make an assessment like that, I think it's got to be heeded as a serious problem. When you look as a result through that lens, sir, at what I've come to describe as a wrecking operation by President Biden and his administration, pretty much across the board, whether it's foreign policy, particularly it's evident in places like Afghanistan, and now I would argue Ukraine, but also across the board domestically as well. And the fact that there seems to be sort of a connective tissue throughout, and that is one of, if not the most important beneficiary of all of those decisions, harmful as they've been to us, is the Chinese Communist Party. It would certainly raise the question, and I think be a good candidate for an investigation, whether it's being done at the direction of Xi Jinping and his ilk. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think that is a big question, and I think that there's no doubt that a lot of what you see is being driven by the ideology of people like Xi and the Chinese Communist Party. We are talking about the Marxist movement in America right now that is behind so much of this. And people for a long time denied that there was a Marxist movement in America, but you can't deny it anymore because you have overt Marxists operating very freely and very proudly in this nation, to include in our Congress. All you have to do is listen to a handful of those members of Congress today who carp about the evils of capitalism and glorify socialism, which is all part of the Marxist movement. And to be very honest with you, what you're seeing happening in our military today, I believe that is driven by these very people who are part of the Marxist movement, who have worked their way into positions of influence, some of which are inside the Congress and others are in the administration.
Yes.
And
In the
I think
Pentagon
that they are
itself, I would argue. And sir, we're going to come back with Trevor Loudon before the program is over, talking more about that macro problem of Marxism in our country and what it's doing to all of our key institutions, arguably. So let me just dwell with you, if I may, on what I think of as kind of a war against the military. And you've spent, as I say, decades of your life in service in our military. You know better than probably anybody the impact that things like the indoctrination of our personnel with this so-called critical race theory, ideological racist program, and the sort of social experimentation in our military, and the purges of conservatives from the military, and these vax mandates are having. Give us just a quick overview, if you would, of what all that translates into in terms of warfighting readiness, to say nothing of esprit de corps and morale.
Well, you used the key word, and that's readiness. We should never forget that our military really has really only two purposes. One is to be a deterrent to war, and the other is to be able to win those wars. You know, Douglas MacArthur made a statement in the West Point Mess Hall in '63 as he talked to the cadets there, and he said, your mission, talking about the mission of the Army, your mission remains fixed, determined, inviolable. It is to win the nation's wars. That has not changed. So anything that the Congress does or that the commander in chief does that impacts on our military should be done with a view towards how does this enhance our readiness. Now, you cannot show me, you cannot demonstrate to me how critical race theory contributes to that readiness. In fact, it does just the opposite. It divides. Unity. Unity. You know why you're seeing the Ukrainians actually beating the Russians right now? Is not because they have more troops than the Russians or more weapons. It is because they are unified in purpose. And secondly, they have absolute tenacity. You've got to have that to win on the battlefield. And what this critical race theory is doing is dividing these organizations, dividing these units by race. And it is divisive, and that is a recipe for disaster on the battlefield.
Unfortunately, its intent is, as you say, sir, to divide and to subvert, and that's how it advances the Marxist agenda. And when we have to take a short break, sir, when we come back, I want to talk with you a little bit more about why it's so dangerous that the only military we have is being subjected to this, and the extent to which the institution of the military itself is being imperiled as well. That and much more with General William Jerry Boykin right after this.